Hey, Tommy from the Run Testers with another running shoe versus. In this video, we're going to be taking a look at the On Cloudboom Echo 3 and the Nike Vaporfly 3. Let's dive in. The On Cloudboom Echo 3 costs £260 or $289.99, weighs in at 227 grams or 8 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 9.5 millimeters. The Nike Vaporfly 3 costs £234.95 or $250. It weighs in at 188 grams or 6.6 ounces for men in a size 8, and the drop is 8 millimeters. The Cloudboom Echo 3 is one of the most exciting new developments across On's performance shoes. The most important update is the addition of the brand's new Pebax foam that works alongside a full-length carbon plate to provide propulsion and bounce when racing. On also states that the design aims to reduce energy loss. The upper is a microfiber design built to improve breathability and to limit water absorption when your feet start to sweat. And the outsole features a healthy covering of rubber over the forefoot, with smaller sections across key areas of wear in the heel. The shoe also has a geometrically optimized rocker shape to promote a fast, fluid transition, and there's a crafted foam build to provide a personalized fit. The Nike Vaporfly 3 is the eagerly awaited update to the hugely popular Vaporfly 2. Unlike its predecessor, the Vaporfly sees a number of updates across the length of the shoe to increase comfort and improve performance on race day. One of the biggest updates is a revamped outsole design. This sees a thinner covering than the previous version, which has allowed for a very slight increase in midsole foam. The shoe also features a new waffle outsole rubber at the front of the shoe to improve grip and durability. To add greater stability, there's a wider heel base of midsole foam, and there's a new Flyknit upper to improve breathability and produce a more comfortable fit that contours the foot. There's also a wider toe area for a roomier fit, a padded tongue for comfort, and an internal foam pod in the heel for even more cushioning.
I was perfectly happy in my normal running shoe size in both of these shoes. That's a UK 9. The Nike has probably a slightly worse fit around the heel, but it hasn't caused me any major problems. I've run a marathon in this shoe, and if you heel lock it, I didn't get any noticeable slip. I think the On's got a very good upper. It's roomy in all the right places around the toes, and then has a nice secure hold around the heel and midfoot without being aggravating in any way. So I would stick with your normal running shoe size and your normal size for On or Nike running shoes with these.
So when it comes to fit, I ran in a UK 8.5 in both the Cloudboom Echo 3 and the Vaporfly Next Percent 3. I think the big differences here is that the Vaporfly Next Percent 3 just feel a bit roomier in terms of, it's mainly about that Flyknit uppers that flex a lot more. So there's a lot more wiggle room in the toe box. I think the lacing, it feels a little bit looser. The other thing to notice, I think the On Cloudboom Echo in that size, they just come up a little bit longer in the toe box. So there's a bit more length than you'll find in the Vaporfly 3. Doesn't make a huge amount of difference to me. To be honest, I didn't find, but yeah, I think the On Cloudboom Echo, much more snug fit, maybe a bit tighter across the midfoot where you sort of find that big toe knuckle. But I would still recommend going true to size in both of these shoes.
Fit for me in both of these shoes. I'm a size 8, these are both size 8, and I found they fit me very well. Both of them are race shoes. They're designed to be a little bit, I wouldn't say tight, but fairly secure on the feet, so there's not a lot of wiggle room in them. I would say that the Cloudboom Echo 3 has probably got less space in it than the Vaporfly 3. I found the Vaporfly to be quite roomy in the forefoot, and I would stick to my size in both of these shoes.
So I've just done my side-by-side mile. I've got the On Cloudboom Echo on my left foot. I've got the Vaporfly Next Percent 3 on my right foot. Again, two really interesting shoes to compare like this. If anything, from the uppers, the Vaporfly's uppers, which are more stretchy, you've got that kind of weave there, which is much more flexible. There's much more wiggle room, and it kind of moves with your toes. It makes the feel of the uppers and the roominess of the Vaporfly 3 much more baggy, much more roomy. I mean, depending on how you like it, some might think it's a bit baggy, some people might like the room, but you've definitely got a lot more flex. The On Cloudboom Echo, they kind of lock you in and hold you in. Now for me as well, I think the traditional heel collar, that little bit of padding that you're getting from the Cloudboom Echo 3, I think just gives me a little bit more of a secure hold as well. Not to say the Vaporfly 3, I haven't had any slipping from them, but you can just feel there's a little bit more airy, it's a little bit more kind of loose. It's just not quite kind of as, close fitting and hugging as you get from that more traditional heel collar, which is something I like. Maybe you like the limited kind of that minimal padding that you get in the Vaporfly 3. If you prefer that kind of fit, then the Vaporfly 3 are going to be for you. I think another thing that's really important to mention here is just the lacing structure. You've obviously got that kind of lateral lacing lacing, kind of angled lateral lacing structure on the Vaporfly 3, where it kind of, you lace down and it goes a little bit out to the outside of the foot. Got more traditional lacing on the on, and the laces span right across the top of your midfoot basically. So the lacing is very much more present, I feel, on the Cloudboom Echo. For me, that makes it easier to get a bit more of a kind of tighter fit than I get from the Vaporfly 3. Again, I think this could come down to personal preference. How much do you want to feel those laces locking down across the top of the foot? How much do you like the extra little bit of room feeling that you get, particularly to the medial side with the Vaporfly 3, because of that lacing going the other way? So again, another thing just to point out, those are very different in terms of the way these shoes are built. Now, when it comes to the ride, I think there's a few key distinctions here. The first one is that midsole foam. The Vaporfly 3 were made softer. They took away some of the firmness, they tweaked the plate, and that overall kind of sort of stiffness that you had, I think, in the earlier Vaporflies has been tweaked to make this a more democratic shoe that's perhaps a little bit more protective, a little bit more cushioned for those people who might be running a little bit more ragged with their form later into longer runs. I understand why Vaporfly have done that. The opposite is true here of the Cloudboom Echo, which now it's much kind of firmer. The platform of that midsole cushion doesn't collapse as much. Even just standing here, I can feel like I'm lower in the Vaporfly 3 than I am on the bed of foam in the Cloudboom Echo 3. And when you run, that Cloudboom Echo 3 foam engages far quicker and it kind of far earlier into your step than the Vaporfly 3, which now I think just kind of sinks it a little bit. There's a stiffness and a rocker and a spring that comes back from the Cloudboom Echo 3, which I think is now gone from the Vaporfly Next Percent 3. What you get with the Vaporfly Next Percent 3, I think, is something that is a little bit more compressive with that Zoom X foam, but I think that sort of racy, all-out kind of stiffness and propulsion that I really liked about the early Vaporfly 3s has gone. And really interestingly, have put it into the Cloudboom Echo 3, and to me, I think it makes it a much better shoe. Now, there's a caveat to this though. I quite like a firm shoe, and this shoe really fits the way that I like to run. It makes me feel racy, it makes me feel like I want to be up running in with my best form. Is it as protective when you get a bit ragged or you're not running with your best form? Are you going to like it if you like a kind of softer shoe slightly? Maybe not. And that's where I think the Vaporfly 3 will still appeal to people. When it comes to stability, I wouldn't say there's too much to choose here. I think it's kind of swings and roundabouts a bit because you're on that kind of slightly higher, slightly sort of curved platform of foam on the Cloudboom Echo. Some of that can affect the stability. And then you've got on the Vaporfly Next Percent 3, you've got that kind of softer sinking. That does, to me, kind of bring in a bit more kind of wobble, particularly if you're landing a bit further back on your feet. But I don't think there's a huge amount to choose here in terms of the stability of the shoe. They are both quite narrow. They've both got quite a kind of slim platform to run off. And in that sense, I think they kind of run quite similar.
So the run test in these two shoes, an interesting one, because this is the first time we've probably reviewed a on shoe that is comparable with a lot of the more premium carbon plate race shoes that are out there. The on Cloudboom Echo 3, it has a lot of changes from previous versions of the shoe. So it uses a new Pebax midsole foam, which is very noticeably different on the run. It feels a lot more responsive. It feels a lot, well, slightly softer, not loads softer. It's still not the softest carbon plate shoe out there, but it's definitely a difference from the previous Cloudboom Echo. It is, in many ways, it's similar to shoes like the Nike Vaporfly 3. It's probably a little bit firmer than those shoes still, but it's definitely a shoe that's designed for running fast, and it does that very well in comparison to the previous versions. I haven't raced in the shoe yet, but I've done intervals, fartleks, longer run in this shoe, and I really enjoyed running in it. I think it was a really impressive update to a series of shoes which probably wasn't really comparable with a lot of the super shoes out there, but this one really is up there. It feels like it's a shoe for me that's designed more for shorter races up to about half marathon. I think I could do a marathon in this shoe, but I think it just still feels a little bit too lean and a little bit too less cushioned than what I would like from my super shoes when I'm doing marathon distance. I think I could do it, but I probably wouldn't pick this shoe if I was doing marathon distance. I think it'd be a little bit harsher than what I want, but for most people, or some people, I think it'd be absolutely fine. Other than that, it has a nice turnover. I don't feel it has a really noticeable effect of the carbon plate and the foam like some super shoes do, but it's definitely fast. It rolls you forward nicely and it's very quick to pick up the pace. The only issue I've had with it is the outsole. Now this is partly due to me because I seem to be having this issue with quite a lot of shoes at the moment, but I did rub off quite a lot of the outsole at the back section of both of the shoes actually. So 2 bits of rubber were in this area here and I rubbed them both off on the first run that I did in them. I have done this in some other shoes. I've done it in the Rocket X3 and in the Vaporfly 3 as well. But I've never done it that easily. And the rubber bits on the outsole of this, there's quite a lot on the front, but at the back it's very minimal. And I have a feeling that my running style is really putting to the test the lessened rubber that is on a lot of super shoes at the moment. Now the Vaporfly 3 is a great shoe. It is, I think, an improvement on the Vaporfly 1 and 2, which are very similar shoes. The changes that have been made to this shoe are largely, they don't make a massive impact on the run of the shoe. I do think there's a little bit more softness in it. I think it's a tiny bit bouncier. And I did notice that when I did a half marathon in this shoe in the later stages. I did feel it a little bit bouncier than the previous versions of the Vaporfly, which I tested. I still think it's a very similar shoe to the Vaporfly 1 and 2. I don't think Nike's done any major updates to this which are noticeable. The design does look quite different. There's a lot of modifications made to the geometry of the outsole and things like that. But all in all, I do think it's a very similar shoe to those Nike Vaporfly 1 and 2. So to be honest, if you can get the Vaporfly 2 a lot cheaper, I still think that's a fantastic shoe, and I don't think you're going to get much more benefits from this shoe than you're going to get from that. Having said that, I do think it's a slight improvement on the Vaporfly 2 just because of that midsole foam. I do like the upper on this as well. It's got a very lightweight upper on it, very thin, very breathable, which I really like for racing. I do actually like the upper on Cloudboom Echo as well. I think it's a very comfortable, secure feeling upper. It's not as breathable as the Vaporfly 3, but only a little bit. It's still pretty similar. And that's it really. There's no other updates to this shoe that I would probably bring up in this review. But I did have, it's on the other shoe actually, but I did rip off the rubber outsole of this as well. They've got very thin layer of rubber on this back section of the shoe. So yeah. I've not seen anyone else do that, but I have seen people talk about the outsole on on Cloudboom Echo 3 being a little bit delicate in that rubber section at the back.
So I had the Vaporfly 3 before the Cloudboom Echo 3. I've done a lot of running in the Vaporfly 3 this year, including the London Marathon and a 4.8k relay race. And yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's all the stuff you love about the Vaporfly in a slightly lighter package with a bit more cushion than the Vaporfly 2. I think it's got more or less the perfect balance for a super shoe in terms of how comfortable it is. It was very comfortable over the course of a marathon and other long runs, whilst also still being very light and nimble. It's lighter than the On, despite maybe seeming like it's going to be a bit heavier, and feels very nimble when you're doing very short races or track reps as well. Really more or less everything you'd expect from Nike shoe. The Zoom X midsole foam, I think, is still the best on the market in terms of the amount of bounce it gives you. It gives you a very soft feeling underfoot. It makes it very easy to engage the plate on the shoe, almost whatever pace you're going at. And yeah, it just bounces you along very merrily, whatever distance you're planning to do. One concern I do have with the shoe certainly is outsole durability. You can see it's ripping up a little bit of the back there around the rubber strips at the back. There's not much rubber at all there, and this stepped design on the bottom of the shoe does seem to increase the wear I've seen on it, but after 100k it's not absolutely terrible, and it doesn't affect performance so much, but it's something to look out for with the Vaporfly 3. Same is actually true of the Cloudboom Echo 3. We'll come on to that in a second. First, talk about the ride of the shoe, which is really good. It's firmer than the Vaporfly, but still very comfortable. I did a half marathon out of the box in this shoe, including a fast 7k stretch in the middle of that where I was running around marathon pace, and it felt very comfortable. Ticks over very nicely. You do get a really noticeable rocker feeling with this shoe, probably more so than the Nike, because it is that little bit firmer and has such a pronounced forefoot toe spring there, and it does feel great for just ticking over at those slower race paces. But I've also done a 5k race in the Cloudboom Echo 3, and yeah, and it's good for that as well when you're going all out over those short distances. You know, really high cadence for me at that stage, and ticking over really fast in the shoe. It feels very nimble, but you have got a nice level of bounce from the new Pebax midsole on the shoe. On that front, I think it's got slightly less bounce than the Vaporfly. I still think the Zoom X is the better foam, and the setup of the Vaporfly means you just get a little bit more propulsion from the shoe. I'd also say that it's slightly harder to feel the plate in the Cloudboom Echo 3 when you're not going at it and running hard. So I think sometimes I was mostly feeling the top layer of the foam there because it's a slightly denser feeling to the Zoom X on the Vaporfly. So that wasn't a problem, obviously, when I was running hard, which is what the shoe is designed to do, to go and do fast races. But I think if you're a lighter runner maybe, or not putting so much force into the shoe, you might not feel the same booming bounce you do from the slightly softer foam on the Vaporfly. Like I said, outsole durability, also a little bit of a concern with the Cloudboom Echo 3. I've only done about 50k in these so far, and I can see slight flaking on this outsole section at the back here. I know Tom's had problems too, and other people around the internet. One thing to look out for there is going to be durability. That's the same on both shoes. But these are, if you buy them as racing shoes and stick to just using it for that rather than for a variety of runs like what I've been doing for the testing, then they're going to last you a decent amount of time, I think.
So my verdict on these two shoes, it's a pretty easy one for me. I would always go for the Vaporfly 3 over the Cloudboom Echo 3, but it's getting closer now, and I do really like this shoe, and I'm looking forward to actually going out for a race in it. I think it's going to do a good job. I might go and do a 5k or 10k in it this weekend. It just feels like a top tier super shoe now, and I definitely think, especially if you're a big fan of On and you really want a race shoe, you've got one now. You didn't really have one before this, but now this shoe really is up there with some of the top tier race shoes. And probably for some people, it might actually deliver a better job. It's a tiny bit firmer than what you get from some things like the Vaporfly 3. And it's just a very quick, nippy shoe and feels really secure on the feet. So I think it's a good option now. But for me, I'm going for Vaporfly 3. I just think it's got more bounce. I just think it's got a nicer, fluid transition to it. And for me, it's just a little bit more energetic, which I like when I'm doing any race from 5k to marathon, but I definitely pick this for any distance. So Nike Vaporfly from 3 for me all the way. I just think it's a better shoe all round. I'd probably put this like in my top 10, but nowhere near the Vaporfly 3, which is probably top 3.
Verdict is a very easy one for me on these two shoes because I do think the Vaporfly is a better shoe. It's a lighter shoe. I think it's a slightly more comfortable shoe, slightly more explosive, propulsive shoe, and it's also a cheaper shoe. So yeah, I would get the Nike Vaporfly 3. I think it's a better shoe all round. Cloudboom Echo 3 is still a very good shoe. I think it's slightly undermined by its very high price in the US, where it's the most expensive carbon shoe I think I've ever tested. It doesn't deliver the performance to justify being more expensive than all those other shoes. It's a very good carbon racing shoe. Be very happy racing in it, but I do think for me it's just a little behind the Vaporfly, which is so well developed at this point. It's had several generations. Nike's refined it to now be really for me, perfect balance of cushioning, speed, weight, bounce, and just, it does everything really well. The On has that slightly firmer feel. It's a more noticeable rocker, probably a little bit more stable as well. So that might be something for people to consider. Probably got a slightly better upper too, but comes to the nuts and bolts of a carbon racing shoe, it's about performance on race day. I think the Vaporfly delivers that slightly better performance, and it's slightly cheaper. So yeah, I'd get the Vaporfly 3.
So on to my verdict then, and this I think is a really interesting one because for a long time the Vaporfly and X% were the top kind of marathon shoe of choice. I think, alongside the Alphafly came along and obviously sort of stole a little of that thunder. But for many people, me included, I really liked racing in them. It's been a long time trying to find a shoe that would work in terms of a carbon racer. And now with the Cloudboom Echo, I'm going to put it out there. I actually think that the Cloudboom Echo is a better shoe for racing. I would say kind of up to the marathon distance. For me, that's basically because it runs a bit firmer. That's the kind of shoe that I like. The Cloudboom Echo 3 feels like the old Vapors used to, where you're not waiting for the foam to compress and come back. And we're talking margins here, but those Vaporfly and X% 3s, for me, they've just gone a bit soggy, a bit smushy. They lack a little bit of that kind of stiffness, that little bit of sort of spring and propulsion that the older generations had. And that's what the Cloudboom Echo actually have brought now. They're maybe not as protective and as comfortable, so I'm not sure everyone's going to want to race long marathon hours in them. If you're thinking about being on feet for 4 or 5 hours, they might become a little bit firm and a little bit unforgiving. But I think for me personally, I'm running the paces I run around the 3-hour marathon mark, something like that, maybe a 3.5 hour. I do think the Cloudboom Echo for me now feel like a shoe that they just feel punchier and a bit more racy. They've got a lot of the old DNA, I think, of the old Vapors. And for me, out of these two now, if I had to pick one to go and race a marathon in tomorrow, it would be the Cloudboom Echo 3.
That's it from us on this Versus. Thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, subscribe, click the little bell, all those sorts of things. And don't forget to check the monthly podcast out that you can find a link for in the caption below. We actually do 2 a month at the moment because we're doing a series where we do interviews with other YouTubers and athletes and things like that. So check that out, and I'll catch you next time.